Why is Eagles running back DeAndre Swift a must play in your flex? And how about all the great Packers options this week against the Buccaneers? It's time to break down our flexes, deep sleepers, and prize picks of the week for week 15 with this Friday edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
Together, we're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league, especially during the fantasy football playoffs. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. And don't forget, those days include Saturday this week. Yep, 3 games on Saturday. Don't forget that. Michelle, before we dive in, I do have to tell people it is a Prize Picks day on the show, so we'll have our Prize Picks of the week. And this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Before we get into some guys we like on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, I don't know what to even say about what happened there. Brandon Staley getting fired, the Raiders. If you played any of those Raiders, you might have played the defense with confidence, but if you played any of the other Raiders, you're feeling good, and you're okay, actually, if you played most of the Chargers not named Austin Eckler. So I don't know what to make of last night's game. I just want to burn all my analysis. I mean,
Brandon Staley deserved to get fired just for not giving the ball to his only good playmaker. Not like Austin Eckler should have touched the ball minimum 40 times last night. And instead he was trying to give it to anyone else. And he deserved to lose by that much. Aiden O'Connell and Easton Stick Aiden O'Connell threw 4 touchdowns, but Easton Stick also ended up with 3 touchdowns because all that garbage time. So he's going to probably end up pretty high in fantasy rankings as well. Fantasy finishes for this week, which is just hilarious. That game was nothing as I expected.
No, it was ridiculous. I mean, I think you'd be happiest. I think a lot of people streamed the Raiders defense. I mean, that was just beat down too with the 2 touchdowns. That second touchdown was ridiculous where they just plucked it out of Easton Stick's hands. But go figure, for the second straight week, Thursday Night Football, when we had low expectations for scoring and everything, we actually might get 2 top 12 QBs again. This is just weird. And that pretty much sums up the season. So knowing all that, we're going to try to do better on our choices here for flex plays, deep sleepers, and prize picks. And again, it's getting weird out there, so we're going to do our best. But we do have some knowledge of what's going to go on. And Michelle, let's reveal your 3 favorite flex plays of the week first. And I think these are great picks.
Yeah, so 2 of mine are in the same game. DeAndre Swift, I'll start there. The Eagles running back against the Seahawks. It's been a rough stretch for DeAndre Swift. So each of the last 3 games, he's been killing you in your leagues, and really for the last 5 games. But it was also a brutal stretch of games for the Eagles and the opponents they had to go up against. And it was just tough games for running backs to really get going in those games. But I don't envision that kind of trouble here against the Seahawks. No team is allowing more fantasy points to the running back position since week 8 than the Seahawks. I expect the Eagles to get back, running the ball a lot with him, utilizing him, and making sure they get this win, right? They need to get some wins under their belt there. So really love Swift this week against the Seahawks. He's one of my favorite running back plays of the week. And then on the other side of the ball, Jackson Smith-Njigba for the Seahawks. Of course, DK Metcalf, great play, right? Tyler Lockett's a usable guy as well. He's more up or down, but Jackson Smith-Njigba is getting a lot of targets as of late, right? They're utilizing him more. Now, last week, it didn't turn into much of anything. He got 7 targets, only 4 receptions, 25 yards against a really tough 49ers. But we know the Eagles just give up so many fantasy points and receiving yards and receiving touchdowns to wide receivers, allowing second most receiving yards to guys at the slot too. So I really love Jackson Smith-Njigba this week. I think they're going to move him all over the place, and he's going to have a really great game against the Eagles. And then my last guy will be a different rookie. I feel like I have him in this section every week, but Jayden Reed against the Buccaneers. You just can't ask for a better matchup for him right now. The Buccaneers are giving up so many fantasy points to wide receivers as of late. DK Metcalf, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Gabe Davis, like all are going off. Oh wait, sorry, I named this wrong wide receivers. That was a completely wrong list of wide receivers against the Buccaneers. But Tank Dell, Drake London, Noah Brown, Brandon Ayuk, Gabe Davis, Michael Pittman, Stephon Diggs, Khalil Shakir all had great games against the Buccaneers, and that was just since week 8, giving up so many fantasy points. And Jayden Reed in 3 of the last 5 weeks has been a top 12 wide receiver. So I think he's just going to keep going and keep growing on that rookie season he's having. It's been really productive.
Yeah, and I like the rushing usage as well. They get him involved and they like to, I guess, give it to him to score on the ground. So that's always a bonus, right? If your player does that. And look, yeah, the Buccaneers, it's rough there. I mean, they're just have had a lot of injuries. Jamel Dean has been hurt. Now Carlton Davis could be hurt. They're just really gashed at corner. So that's been part of the production. Doesn't matter inside, outside, you can burn the Buccaneers. And DeAndre Swift, loved that call. I mean, he's one of those plays of the week that if you have him, you're going to feel really good about him potentially carrying your team this week. That's how good this matchup is. Jackson's been the jig, but watch him maybe outscore Tyler Lockett this week. That's something we should watch for. You look at the Eagles, they're trotting out one time Sidney Brown. Now they've used Bradley Roby there in the slot. It's just not been pretty. So love your picks there. Now I'm going to play off your Packers pick and go Romeo Doubs this week. It's not looking good for Christian Watson. He's all but been ruled out for this game against the Buccaneers. Dontavian Wicks is battling an ankle injury. We'll see if he can go as well. That's going to help Doubs, and Doubs has really come through at home. He's a big touchdown scorer as well. This is a great matchup for him on the outside, especially if Davis misses this game. He's in really good shape as that number one guy here. Default. I mean, he's going to be the guy mostly on the field getting the snaps with Jayden Reed and Tucker Kraft, right? We'll talk about him a little bit more, but those are the main 3 guys for Jordan Love in this particular matchup, and I think that's where the targets are mainly going to go. So I love the matchup for Doubs on the outside as much as I like it for Reed on the inside. Now, Chuba Hubbard, look, there was actually signs of life from Miles Sanders last week. He had a long run, but I think it's more about the scheme, right? I think the Panthers are realizing we cannot pass the ball. I mean, Bryce Young is just getting killed, but our offensive line is pretty good at run blocking. And the Falcons, this used to be a brutal matchup for running backs, but it's gotten really weak of late. And the biggest reason why is there's no Grady Jarrett. He was a great guy in the middle of the field. Ever since he went down, this Falcons run defense not scary at all. I mean, Rachaad White was fine against it last week. So Chuba Hubbard's getting the volume. He's getting majority snaps. He's getting all the things that you want for running back. And I love Chuba Hubbard as a potential big playoff blow-up guy because they get the Packers and that run defense at home next week. So really good schedule here for the lead back for Carolina. And then Odell Beckham Jr., we mentioned him a few times. I mean, primetime, easy matchup here against the Jaguars secondary. He's blowing up. He's making big plays. He's right there ahead of Rashad Bateman behind Zay Flowers. So great spot. So, and it's nice to have a big 3. I mentioned having Reed, Doubs, and Kraft. Well, for the Ravens right now, it's Flowers, Beckham, and Isaiah Likely. So I like that. And that's a good environment for him to be very productive on Sunday night.
Yeah, I almost had OBJ as my favorite as well. I really like him. So he has the stamp of approval from both of us this week. Doubs, it's going to come down to touchdowns for him. I feel like he never really goes off with those receiving yards. But if there's ever a game he's going to get a touchdown or 2, it's going to be against the Buccaneers, right? So there's a pretty good chance of that. And then Chuba Hubbard. I wish his name was Chuba. That would be so much better. Chuba Hubbard is so hard to predict because it's like he was doing really well and then people started to trust him and then he wasn't doing anything. So people got off of him and then he started doing well again. It's like, oh, I feel like as soon as we go back into trusting him, he's going to disappear again. But I mean, a guy that has been getting volume inconsistently, but there's like some games he's the only back there, right? Some days they go completely away from Miles Sanders. Other days they try to get him more involved. I don't know, but he could have a nice week.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a little bit predictable in the fact that if it's a good matchup at home, you can feel much better about him versus a mediocre to poor matchup on the road, right? That's kind of how I feel about the Panthers in general for a lot of their guys. But yeah, this is going to be fun to watch here to see. Maybe they can upset the Falcons. I don't think it's going to happen, but if you had an opportunity to do so, Hubbard would have to be a big part of that game plan. Now, we'll get into some deeper sleepers. So these are some flex plays that you might consider in really deep leagues, 14 teams and all that, if you need them, because I know I'm playing a lot of these guys that we just mentioned in the flex in my league. So we'll get into those 6 deep sleepers, and we'll have our picks of the week as well in our final segment. But we do need to hear more from LinkedIn Jobs. All right. Thanks again for LinkedIn Jobs for sponsoring this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have many top tier candidates as possible. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And look, an NFL team operates like a small business. You need to have that tight knit group that's going to come through for you, and it all about chemistry and getting the right people in your locker room. And that's where LinkedIn is going to help you put together the winning team for your small business. LinkedIn is just not another job board. It is a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small business get a qualified candidate from LinkedIn Jobs within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small business are wearing so many hats and might not have the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker for you. Check it out. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. It's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show here in a moment, and we will look at our deep sleepers. Again, another programming reminder for you. This is an important thing that we're doing across the network that we hope you can check out. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Michelle, I'm interested to see your deep sleepers, and I think we mentioned, I kind of gave it away, that we have one more Packer, but interesting that you have some other guys that have really come on of late as rookies.
Yeah, so I'm going with Parker Washington, Jaguars rookie wide receiver against the Ravens. You know, with Christian Kirk out, he's stepped into that role. He's played 60% or more of the snaps each of the last 2 weeks. Like, they're having him on the field. It didn't turn into a ton last week against the Browns in Cleveland. That's a really tough matchup, but he came down with a touchdown. He had 27 receiving yards, 2 receptions, 3 targets. But I do think in this matchup against the Ravens, it's going to be a tougher one overall, right? But the Ravens are pretty solid at stopping wide receivers. They're middle of the pack, though, against slot wide receivers. So it's not like they're giving up a ton to slot wide receivers. That's the area where they're just middle of the pack in the NFL. I do think this is an area that they can exploit with Trevor Lawrence dealing with the injury. They're probably going to look to be a little bit shorter and just easier passes for him, right? And if the Ravens are going to focus in on stopping Calvin Ridley and maybe even Evan Ingram at this point because how much he's being used, the Parker Washington's going to be needed. So I kind of like it. He scored a touchdown at least each of the last 2 games, filling in for Christian Kirk. So I could see him scoring again, putting up 5 receptions, 50 yards, like a modest game, but someone that could be a viable flex play for you or a solid DFS play as well, super cheap. And then another guy who would be really cheap in DFS is Chase Brown. The running back for the Bengals. He's been mixing in with Joe Mixon a little bit, right? His snap count's going up. They seem to be trusting him a little bit more. He had the big receiving yard game last week. He had the nice rushing yard game the week before that. And why I like this matchup for him is because it's against the Vikings and it's going to seem counterproductive, right? Because the Vikings are very solid against stopping the run, but I actually think that's in Chase Brown's favor because they're not going to just be able to utilize Joe Mixon and run it up the middle, right? They're going to have to get creative with these plays with these running backs. And I think with that creativity, they're going to have to use Chase Brown more in those short little passes or just like get more creative with getting them to the outside. And that's why I think Chase Brown will get more work. Now, definitely, he's a risky play, right? 100%. He might get 8 total touches in this game. So it's really just if you're desperate for that RB2 spot, right? You need a second running back to fill in, or if you're going to go cheaper in a DFS spot there. And then if you're looking for a tight end, I talked about him on yesterday's show. Tucker Kraft is a guy I actually really, really like this week up against the Buccaneers. Buccaneers allowing the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends, a ton since week 8, even more than the 5th most. And then also his playing time. I mean, he was on the field 100% of the snaps in week 14, and he's run the 5th most routes among all tight ends since week 12. So over the last 3 weeks that Luke Musgrave hasn't been there, he's only run fewer routes than Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Travis Kelce, and Jake Ferguson per PFF. So with this matchup and how much he's on the field and running routes, I think he can have a career high game, which right now, that was just last week, 64 yards. It wouldn't be that crazy to beat as a rookie just starting to get his time on the field.
Yeah, this is incredible, really, Michelle. If you think about it, how many rookies have had fantasy relevance at different times of the year, right? I mean, even last night, I look at the game with Quentin Johnson and Aiden O'Connell and Michael Mayer. I mean, not that you would necessarily played all of them, but there's so many guys that are just more relevant right away. And these guys, like, you're right. I mean, these guys get thrust into these roles because of injuries. And look, and these teams are not differentiating, right? They're like, okay, next man up, here you go. And we're going to that. You may not get the same level of talent as the starters, but still the opportunity is there. And that definitely is the case for Washington, Brown, and Kraft. Now, I'm going with the few veterans, and not very old veterans, except for the first guy. And I have a 2 Robinson play for you if you have these guys. Yeah, first Robinson I have is Demarcus Robinson. Now, he's a very popular name this week with waiver wire and all that. Yeah, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Yeah, they can smash against the Commanders, but Demarcus Robinson also has a very good matchup. Tutu Atwell may be playing, and he's been banged up, and that's what's allowed Robinson to have a little bit more relevance. You also have Davis Allen, the young tight end, with Tyler Higbee banged up. So there are some options there for that third guy behind Kupp and Nacua, but Demarcus Robinson, just too grave a matchup. He's seen the end zone of late in key targets from Matthew Stafford. So looking at it, look, you're a little bit dependent on him and getting 6 targets, but it definitely could happen. And what you want in this game is an absolute shootout between the Commanders and Rams, and that will facilitate Robinson's usage here. Now, the other Robinson I have is Wan'Dale Robinson, and he's playing the Saints this week, and the Saints are very tough on the outside. So I don't think Jalen Hyatt is going to get going here for Tommy DeVito, but you saw Robinson come through. And what happened last week is the Packers just kind of gave him some room in the middle of the field to attack. And the Saints are going to do something similar. They do have a weak slot corner there in Alontae Taylor. So you really can't throw outside the Saints here, even without Marshawn Lattimore as well. So look, I'm looking at Wan'Dale Robinson getting a few targets there, maybe like a 6 for 60 line. But look, that's good enough if we're looking at him as a deep sleeper. And then one more guy in his second year as well, like Wan'Dale, is Khalil Shakir. And look at Shakir and the slot, right? That's where he pretty much plays for the Bills. The Cowboys are, again, weakest in the slot. They've got Deron Bland and Stephon Gilmore, the former Bill, on the outside. That could be a little tough for Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis at times. So might look to Jordan Lewis in that matchup. And keep in mind, with the Joe Brady, their new offense coordinator, they're looking a lot to James Cook, looking a lot to the tight ends, work in the middle of the field, and trying to protect Josh Allen from turnovers. So I like Shakir's chances in this game. So again, these are not really high guys that you're going to have explosive plays, but if you're looking some floor and half or full point PPR, I think you can get them from these 3 players.
Yeah, my favorite one here is Wan'Dale Robinson. They really should be utilizing him more consistently. I feel like he is a really great weapon for them, and they don't get him into the game plan enough
Yeah.
consistently every week. But when they do, that's when they succeed. So hopefully Tommy DeVito looks to him again. It can't be all just to Saquon Barkley, right? You got to get the ball into everyone else's hands as well. And I think Wan'Dale is a really special weapon for them too. So if they get him going, that's a really great call there. My favorite part of the week is when we get into our picks of the week. PrizePicks has turned into one of my favorite apps out there, daily fantasy app. So we'll get into our favorite picks of the week to end our week 15 fantasy shows. But before that, let's talk about another one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever find that just as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain suddenly won't stop talking? Do your thoughts start racing right before bed or other inopportune moments? It turns out one great way to make those racing thoughts go away is to talk them through. Therapy gives you a place to do that so you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. All right, Vinny, let's get into our favorite picks of the week. So for those who don't know, it's a app, daily fantasy. You pick 2 to 6 players, I believe. Is it
Yep.
2 to 5 or 2 to 6?
You can go 6. Yeah.
You go 6, and you select more or less than their
Yeah.
projections, and you win some money. It's a fun time. So we'll give you our favorite picks for week 15. You can go first with your top 3.
Well, before we start, they've added something called goblins and demons here, which
Yeah.
is interesting. The goblins, basically, it's kind of like adjusted lines, right? Essentially. So you get a little bit lesser return, but if you want to go for a lower number, goblins are there. But if you want a little bit be aggressive, you can go to the demons and push it a little bit in the different direction. So I do like that opportunity here. So I do have a couple of demon picks for you, Michelle. So I'll get into those. I just like saying that. If there was one for DeAndre Swift, I would probably take it, but I'm going for the simple one here. More than 57.5 rushing yards. And I'm looking at this everywhere. I mean, this is a very low number. The Seahawks give up like something like 123 to 125 rushing yards per game at this stage. And we talked about how bad the run defense has become. Eagles want to run the ball. They won't be trailing in this game, right? They won't be blown out like the 49ers or Cowboys. They'll at least be even with the Seahawks, we would imagine, here as their 3-point favorites on the road in Seattle. So that's good for DeAndre Swift. He's going to get the ball, and they don't throw to him that much. I'm not going to look at his receiving total. I just don't want to see that. But touchdown attempted there as well. But I do like that straight up yardage number, 57.5 more for DeAndre Swift. Now, my first demon pick, and these are both in the same games, and maybe it's appropriate, right? Demons, Detroit, Denver. That's where I'm going. And the first one is Jahmyr Gibbs, 69.5. Now, I think his regular is like at 56.5 there for more. But look, I'm going to go the 13 extra yards. Why not, right? This Broncos run defense is the worst in giving up fantasy points, giving up reality rushing yards, however you want to slice it. It is bad. And what do the Lions do best? Where they need to do, much like the Eagles, right? They need to run the ball, protect Jared Goff. Their passing game has been a little spotty of late, right? And the Broncos very good. Again, stopping quarterbacks with Pat Surtain and their pass rush and all that. So lines up well. Jahmyr Gibbs, Dave Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. They should just keep interchanging, handing the ball off to these two guys. So 59.5, I'll take it here. Dave Montgomery, a little bit too high for me on the demon. I think it's right close to 100. So I'm going to go with the much easier one here, 69.5 more than for Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, in the same game, it's not a week, and go figure, Chris Olave and Jamar Chase let down with the yards for me last week. The guy that came through on one run early in the game was Bryce Young when he scrambled for like 20 yards there against the Saints. So he came through 11.5, but I'm going much higher this week, Michelle. And this is the demon pick for Russell Wilson, more than 36.5 rushing yards.
Spicy.
Now, this is the one that you look at this matchup. The Lions allow the most rushing yards per average in fantasy to running backs or to quarterbacks, I should say. They're really good on running backs, so that also helps that they're going to shut down Javonte Williams. But when Russell Wilson is in a shootout or a negative game script and he's got to take off and run and he's going to be pressured, you would think a little bit by Aiden Hutchinson in this game, he usually rushes for a lot. And I like that his rushing is back as part of his game. It's good for fantasy. It's good for this situation as well. So I'm going demon. I think it's around 23.5 for just the regular if you want to go there. But look, I'm going to go the 13 extra yards here. I'm lucky 13, Russell Wilson. I think he gets 40 rushing yards in this game or more. So I'm taking the more on them. So 2 demons for you in that game. I know you have one as well, Michelle.
Yeah, I have a demon pick here. I'll start with that. I'm shocked it's a demon pick. So it's Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
All he has to do is score 1 rushing or receiving touchdown because the projection is a half rush or receiving touchdown.
Okay.
Yeah, I will take a shot on that because he has scored both a rushing and a receiving touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks. He has 3 receiving touchdowns over the last 2 weeks and a rushing touchdown in each of his last 3 games. So yeah, he's scoring constantly as of late. Also, the Cardinals have allowed the 4th most passing touchdowns this year, so 4th most receiving touchdowns, and 5th most rushing touchdowns. So they're bad in both areas. So it's not like I'm like, oh, well, he has to get it this way. He can get it either way. I won't be shocked, right? He might score multiple touchdowns. So I am happy to get that extra juice there with that demon pick, make even more money if I hit on this more than half of a rushing or receiving touchdown. And then I have another touchdown one, but it's just straight up. There's no demon or goblin here. It's just Sam Howell, 1.5 total, more than 1.5 total touchdowns against the Rams. He's had 2 touchdowns, at least 2 touchdowns in 8 of 13 games played this year, 2 touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 games played. And the Rams offense, we know they're going to put up points against the Commanders, right? We're predicting that Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams, they're all going to have good games against Washington. So that means Washington will have to throw a ton, as they usually do. And the Rams, they started strong on defense, not so much lately. Kyler Murray, Joe Flacco, and Lamar Jackson each had at least 2 touchdowns against the Rams over the last 3 weeks. So if they're doing it, I'm going to say Sam Howell's going to throw enough that the probability of him having 2 total touchdowns in this game is pretty high. And then my last pick will be a guy I've been talking way too much about, Tucker Kraft, but his projections just at 34.5 receiving yards against the Buccaneers. So I'm going to take that more than 34.5 receiving yards because the last 2 weeks he's had 64 yards and 37. So he's had more in each of the last 2 weeks now that he's been playing more. As I've already said, the Buccaneers are really bad against tight ends. They've allowed the 6th most receiving yards to tight ends this season and 2nd most receiving yards since week 8 to tight ends. So I think this is a really easy projection to say, yeah, I think Kraft will get more than that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to relate your DFS picks all around, and that's the smart way to do it. I mean, if you have faith in a guy like Tucker Kraft, as Michelle does, go find him and go find the number that you can comfortably play him in as many formats as you can. So good call for you on those. Now, I love our picks. My only question about this goblins and demons, why aren't they called like Grinch and Krampus or something for the holiday season? Why is it like,
well, that might
it seems like Halloween.
They would have to switch it, after Christmas.
Yeah, they can make the little emoji logo. It's a little different, but I do like it. I do like the little bit of an extra challenge, right? We're always looking for adjustments there. And then there's the thing that we have if somebody gets hurt that we're good as well. So really check out PrizePicks. It's a good way to play, especially if you're out of the fantasy football playoffs and you want to still use your noodle here to figure out who to play and how to play them and have a real shot at winning some cash here before the holiday season is over. Because look, there's still some shopping days of Christmas, so maybe you can put a little bit of money in your wallet and get there. So those picks are awesome, and go check them out and play now. And yeah, we're done here for this week of week 15. Don't forget to set your lineups on Saturday. I cannot stress this enough. 3 big games, a lot of fantasy implications there. So make sure you've got all those players in, and of course, Sunday and Monday as well. For this edition and this week of Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.